Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the latest studio release titled The Black by the Swedish metalcore band Imminence. This is the band's 5th studio album, following on from Heaven in Hiding from 2021, and this is an album that really sees the band producing some of their heaviest and some of their darkest work. We've certainly seen the band continue to evolve since the release of their debut studio album I back in 2014. With This Is Goodbye in 2017, they moved on to more of a post-hardcore metalcore mix that wasn't too well received, and since then they've been kind of building back up with Turn the Light On from 2019 and then moving into Heaven in Hiding in 2021. And with this album, they've really just again tried to continue to show that sonic expansion by really delving into something that makes the band so unique. The use of the violins, it's something that Eddie Berger's incorporated into much of the band's music and really allows them to kind of stand out from a lot of other bands in the same space. So will this latest album have us completely enveloped or leave a black mark on the band's discography? Let's take a look at it track by track. Opening the album, we do have Come Hell or High Water, with this very interesting opening dredging sound with its slow plodding build as well, and I really like the way that this track sets the tone for the album. It serves as a great opener for setting this dark, ominous tone that we're going to see really kind of build into this complete darkness later on as we move through the rest of the tracks. And I love the way that we've also got this breakdown that feels like you're effectively being swallowed up by something towards the end of the track. It's really got this great build to allow us to set ourselves up for what we're going to get to hear going forward, and we can see that through some of the lyrics. There's a monster growing in our heads like sheep to the slaughter, just being led on this journey, just being led into this point where you're going to be corrupted and consumed by something. So I liked a lot of the lyrics and the way that kind of set up, and this certainly felt like a really strong opener for the band. And also with a lot of the music videos they released as well, we did see this more cinematic styling coming from the band, and this was the first we did get to hear and really kind of again set the tone for a lot of the music videos and the story they were going to tell by using them. Then we do move into Desolation, a track that really just shows us being enveloped by the black. We've really been consumed by it. We're really thrown into the pits of despair. We're in this barren wasteland, and I love the way that the track really gives off that feel. Why can't I close my eyes from everything inside? The fact that you are effectively devoid of all feelings, and we do have a lot of these minimalist elements really coming in between the chorus and the pre-chorus to really show this desolate wasteland. It's barren of all feeling, barren of all emotion. Silence, swallow me whole, consumed by the wasteland. So I love the fact that it's almost saying like you've got nothing in your life, you've been completely devoid of all light, all the happiness has been drained out of you, and now you're effectively swimming in the black, in this big open wasteland where you can't find this light. And we're not going to see a lot of light really coming through on this album, which really fits in with the idea of the black, really showing the darkness and the heaviness, and really allowing that to come through with some of the choices they've made with the themes that are found on the album. And it's quite descriptive as well, the idea of searching for a light in the dead of night. And I love some of these descriptive choices the band have used, that it being the dead of night. It could just be searching for a light in the night, but it's actually this dead of night. It really feels much more hollow, much darker by bringing in some of these lyrical choices, really amplifying the darkness. We also get these plucked strings that are used to build into the bridge, something I really love. They're making use of the violin and the classical elements in so many different ways to really build the tension, to really set that ominous kind of where are you at kind of tone, where you kind of almost put yourself in the position of this person that they're kind of personifying in the story of the album. Then for track 3 we do have Heaven Shall Burn, which feels very, very cinematic, as it opens with the strings and the backing vocals really alluding to this build-up of grandeur. It really has again this massive expansiveness that the classical elements really help to do on this track. It really has this very powerful cinematic feel. It feels like the burning down of all hope, the idea that the end is nigh, really highlighting the idea of Armageddon, the loss of all good things in your life. I've eaten the lies to feed all my demons. Just really showing the idea of how you're constantly kind of focusing more on this negative aspect and really referencing back to Heaven in Hiding. First it was hiding, but now it's being completely immolated, it's being burnt down, and you can really see that amplified again by the aggression and the tones that really come from Eddie Berg and the really powerful drumming guitar work we do see on this track to really just show this massive cinematic masterpiece. You can imagine this being used in a Christopher Nolan movie, just the expansiveness and the power the band do provide in this track to really give it that epic feeling of just this entirety of heaven just burning down to the ground. Then we do move into track 4, which is Beyond the Pale, one of the first tracks we didn't get to hear as a single release, which has much more of a melodic style, really bringing in these violin interludes, the idea of feeling the devil inside, there's no turning back, so we continue to see this complete darkness of kind of dancing with the devil. What if death could set me free? So the idea of heading into this black, the idea of there being no afterlife, no escape from this feeling that this person, this character in this story is effectively feeling. They've gone beyond the pale, they've gone past that point of no return. And we can constantly see that really being brought in. We've also got this whispered pre-breakdown, like the demons whispering in your ear before we do move into that very chunky breakdown on this track. Just every track showing something slightly different, not kind of having that monotonous feeling, and the way they continue to really drive in these classical elements on different tracks to really give it different forms of power and different feelings, but continuing to really focus the ideas of the album around this idea of being in this desolation, being in this black that you can't escape of, and bringing in the lyrics such as the things like demons, that really kind of pulling in that heaven and hell scenario, and how you're so far removed from heaven that you feel like you have absolutely no way of getting back to it. Then for track 5 we do have Death by 1,000 Cuts, which I think they use one really strong element I really like in this track, and it's the actual heartbeat sound in the back of the track. It does have this more powerful, more anthemic chorus that really comes in. I've come to live with the pain, can you turn back time to change what you've done, to shape who you've become? So it's a much more reflective track in the way that it looks back. Maybe could I have done things differently to avoid myself getting enveloped by the black? Could I have changed who I am and been a better person? So you can really see it kind of getting to that point where they've been dwelling in the black in this desolate wasteland, and now they're getting to that point where they're trying to reflect back and make those changes. And the idea of death by 1,000 cuts, these lots of little mistakes are effectively things that you've done wrong that gradually build up to the point where you're paying for your sins. Death by 1,000 cuts, do you bleed for something or will you die for nothing? So it also touches on the idea of doing these lots of little changes to kind of make sure that you're not dying for nothing. Look back and be able to say, I've done these things with my life and I've actually got these happy moments I can draw on, rather than just kind of constantly making the wrong decisions and having these bad moments that build up to the point where you get to the end of your life, look back and you've died for nothing, you've not achieved anything in your life. And we do get this much more anthemic styling really coming through, especially in that chorus, as well as a very powerful breakdown and bridge. They really do put a lot of strong elements into this track, that one by one being repeated, just to really show this emphasis of how these small little things can add up, that 111, just constantly these little numbers build up to this 1,000. So I love the way they kind of use that as an idea to really build into the track. And as we do head towards the end of the track, we also see the dropping of the heartbeat sound to round it out. So at moments you've got that heartbeat still beating, you're still alive, still beating, and towards the end of the track, as we get into that outro, you've effectively been killed off because these 1,000 cuts have built up to the end of life. So a little musical choice I really appreciate that they threw into this track. Then for track 6 we do have Come What May, which certainly has a much more symphonic metal intro. We do see elements of kind of black gaze, and we do see again a kind of use of poetic lyrics. It's something they do quite heavily on this album to really add to the flow, to the actual stylings that we do see as they kind of delve between something heavier and something slightly more kind of free-flowing. The idea of remaining the victim of this sorry state, so we're kind of back into that wallowing state of just accepting whatever may happen to you rather than trying to kind of fight. So it really shows this loss of kind of almost fight that somebody's willing to give, and we can see that for better or for worse, come what may, I can't live one more day at the mercy of my own dismay. So you've just kind of effectively given up all hope. So again, really seeing that darkness, that blackness, that devoid of all light idea that we have seen on many of the tracks. And one thing I really love that they do on this particular one is we do have this extended outro, and it's very kind of minimalistic again, but it shows the idea of come what may. It's almost like you're just waiting for the end to come. You're just waiting for this whatever possibility may happen in your life. So I really love the way they kind of again show these choices to really amplify the messages they're trying to convey in every single track. Just the fact that you are waiting for the things that could happen, you rather than fighting for it, you're just kind of wallowing in the nothingness, just to that point where death does eventually come and take you. So again, a great choice to kind of have an extended track, the longest track on the album at 6:13, but really just showing or having a reason for this expansiveness and this extended outro that we do see featured within. Then for track 7 we do have Cul-de-Sac, which is effectively translates to dead end. So it's quite an interesting way that kind of again showing this idea, even though it is a musical kind of interlude, the idea that you can't actually kind of turn things back. You can't progress because you're effectively hitting this dead end constantly. You're trapped in this area. And I love the way that on this actual album, rather than having maybe 1 minute interludes, these songs are effectively like 2.5 minutes or longer for the 3 that we do find within the album. But it allows them to really show the continuation of these ominous dark tones, really show their influence from classical music, and that's something they've done extremely well on this album. Really incorporate these classical elements. They've kind of avoided going too heavily into symphonic metalcore. They've kind of found this niche space in between where they use the classical elements to really amplify a lot of the stylings and make this album feel like it's much more cinematic. And we saw that through the music videos as well as some of these little interludes to really just show how they're kind of building in these little breaks in the moment and to kind of provide it from being such a heavy, dark, depressing album to really just kind of give you those moments to breathe. For track 8, we do have The Call of the Void, the idea of staring down into the gates of hell, holding on until the bitter end. So we're seeing a bit more fight with this track, and we see the pure aggression coming from Eddie Berg in this track, but the idea that we've kind of moved away from the previous track, Come What May, where we kind of saw the idea of giving up, of kind of starting to see that slight change, that little bit of fight still being there, the idea of holding on until the bitter end. It's not a pleasant place to be, but you're going to kind of hold on. As the sky is falling down, a crimson veil upon an empty crown, I feel the end is coming. So you can really see as we move through the album, we're hitting that point where effectively death is finally here. We've been wallowing around in the black, in the desolation for some time, but death is kind of there, and it feels like the call of death that's really being brought in. And the bridge I love in this track, how it kind of highlights the emptiness and the openness of the void. It is this black space effectively where there is absolutely nothing. So again, tying to things such as Desolation with its wasteland, the fact that they also use some of these more ethereal sounds as well on this track to really kind of amplify the idea of that void space. You can kind of just show how the fact that it spreads out constantly into nothing. So I like these little choices the band have made to really show the extra attention to detail on this album, especially shown on this track. Then for track 9 we do have Continuum, which shows the idea that tragedy awaits for those who dwell in the shadows. The idea that if you constantly dwell in this black space, you are effectively just going to gradually be eaten away, given up, and dissolved into nothing. So we do also see references to previous tracks, the line Come Hell or High Water, as well as this ethereal chorus that's intertwined with these beautiful instrumental bridges. And we do start to see the rare glimpse of light on the album, the idea of chasing time under the sun till kingdom comes. So really kind of looking at that more heaven-esque kind of moment. After it's burned down, there's still that very small glimpse of light that if you kind of chase time under the sun, there's a chance that you may actually eventually reach kingdom come if you live this life of fulfillment effectively. But we do still see the idea of this blackened heart feed the dark. So this person's still in this moment where they've got a black heart, they're still dwelling in the darkness, but they're maybe reaching out for that very small spark of hope. So we start to see a little bit of a transition, and it's one of the few moments on the album where we do start to see this potential more lighter side. Then for track 10 we do have L'appel du vide, which is just the translation, the call of the void. Again, seeing this slow gradual build before we do head into the final full track for the album, and again just making great use of some of these little effectively interludes / tracks that we do see included, just focusing more on the instrumental side. And I think it's great. I think it's great to see the band really getting to pull out something that a lot of other bands are capable of using, really putting that violin to great effect. And the one thing that was quite surprising on this album, that it didn't come straight after Call of the Void, it does come after Continuum. So really just showing something a little bit different, and the idea of Continuum really showing how this expansiveness, this continuous cycle really coming through on the Call of the Void as well, that this expansiveness, this darkness will continue to kind of build within you unless you effectively break the cycle. So that idea of Continuum then moving into the Call of the Void, the blackness almost calling out to you, trying to reach out to you and pull you into death, whereas there is nothingness going on for eternity. So I like the way they kind of made that slight little change up rather than having the actual kind of interlude straight after the Call of the Void. Then for track 11 we do have effectively the final full track on the album, which brings in the piano as we move towards the effectively epilogue of this album. I love the way they kind of bring that in, and some lyrics that really start to see the reference of the cycle. It's something that they've really seemed to have focused on as they've been building this album with different music videos. They'd have caught in a circuit, no means to an end. So you're constantly just this flowing around this circuit, going in circles, looking for the path of least resistance. And we can really see how it's this idea of if you get in that mind space and get in that cycle of living in the black, living in the darkness, you will never break it because it's a very downward kind of slope that you can go on, and you really need to do something to break out of that circle, break out of that cycle. And we can see that with the album cover as well. They've gradually been piecing in the circle to kind of show this continuum, this wheel effectively that just keeps on spinning. So I love the way that they have drip fed us different parts of this album, and they're really kind of bringing it full circle at the end. The idea of having this no means to an end. Why can't I pull the thorn in my side, Lord? Lord knows I've tried. So you're constantly making these attempts to break out of this darkness to this point where you can finally escape it and see a lighter side. But we can kind of see also a bit of a full circle moment, kind of referencing back to Hell or High Water, the crashing between the soft and the heavier elements and returning to this more plodding melody that we did see at the opening of the album. So really just completing the cycle, really just showing that it has this continuum effect of just living in this blackness, and really how it just can be this destructive cycle that effectively leads you closer and closer to death. Then rounding things out, we do have Le Noir, which is the black, and we use the violin to close this album. It's just really just adds to this, again, this ominous presence that we have seen present throughout the entire album. And I love how this does leave us on a bit of an effective cliffhanger, because we do see this moment build up at the end of this album where it has two potential options. Is this character that we've been kind of showing throughout the album finally swallowed by the black? Have they finally met death, or have they found a way to free themselves from the black? So the band have effectively kind of left us with two potential options. It could take it either way, but I love the way that they're not kind of just giving us a finite ending to the story. We do have two different ways of potentially looking at it, and we could see them getting freed from the black as the next chapter of the band's album. They do really like to incorporate a lot of their story. We've certainly seen that over the past couple of albums, and especially on this one as well. But I just love the way we do have this classical way of rounding out the actual album, because it's just something that's been so prevalent and so powerfully used across the album that it really feels like it helps in making this effectively like a piece of cinema rather than just a single piece of music. Despite all the darkness and heaviness on this album, it really is a thing of beauty. Quite a bizarre thing to say considering how much time we spend in the black in this very desolate wasteland on this album, but it is definitely some of the band's best work since their debut studio album I from 2014. They continue to master their craft of bringing in these classical elements, and they dance between symphonic metal, metalcore, as well as just that classical intertwined style that they do have that is very unique to the band, and I think they put it to great effect. This isn't just an album that you listen to, it's an album you see, it's an album you feel. It has this very cinematic style. I can imagine some of the songs from this being used on a big screen for a piece of cinema, for a blockbuster movie, because it really adds that power and that element to what we do see really being brought through on the musical stylings as well as many of the lyrics. And we see so much attention to detail just from some of the lyrical choices the band have used, just some of these interludes that really allow to build this ominous dark presence that's so devoid of light, and really just build the emotion into the album as well. They do some great work, and one person I've really got to highlight, apart from Eddie Berg and the violin elements he brings in, is Peter Handstrom. The drumming work on this album is absolutely incredible. I mean, if you just solely focus on the elements he's included on this, it's incredible some of the power he's providing to this album in many of these tracks. But as a whole, this is definitely a real standout moment for the band, and it's great to see them finally getting the recognition, and it's very much deserved given how strong this album is. And for those reasons, I do have to give this album a 9 out of 10. It's an album I've gone back in the past week and listened to multiple times, and every time I'm finding something new that I just absolutely love that they have included. I know for maybe some kind of standard metalcore fans, they may find it a bit jarring, the classical elements really being brought in, but I think it is one of those albums that even if you're not a fan of classical, you have to appreciate the elements the band have brought across and the way they've built in this story of this character going through these moments. And especially if you haven't seen the music videos, I would highly recommend doing so, because they also help to build some of the picture that we have seen really incorporated and ingrained into the music. But one thing I would love to know is your thoughts about this album in the comments section below. Do you think it's some of their best work? Do you agree with what I say, or do you have different feelings? I really would love to know. Maybe let me know what your favourite track is from this album and why as well. Also, if you would like to see more Imminence content, I have covered some of the tracks from this album in more detail in separate videos, so you can find links to those in the description of this one. And if you'd like to see more content like this overall, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.